As a development expert and one who's very optimistic about Nigeria, what are the gains to celebrate in the year 2023 as far as the development landscape in Nigeria is concerned?
It's always very difficult to assess various sectors using one brush to paint the developmental strides. But I think we must be specific in terms of, are we talking about housing? Are we talking about the social goods? Are we talking about human capital development? It's good to put them into perspective. So if we're looking at the area of housing and transportation, for example, if you are looking at the social intervention from government to cushion the effects of the fuel subsidy removal, then we'll be able to speak to specific issues as we progress the conversation.
Let's begin from housing.
Okay, I think there's generally a housing deficit in the country. So going forward for 2024, the new administration must focus more on trying to see how we can provide social housing to cushion the effect, particularly the middle class that is worst hit in that arena. So there are a lot of government buildings that have been abandoned. I would like to suggest to those in charge to see how they can convert some of those buildings into social housing that will help to ameliorate the housing deficit that the country has suffered, particularly in the last 20 years. In the year 2020, Vision 2020, we're thinking of how to see how we can reduce the housing deficit by 15%. That has not been achieved. So going forward in 2024, it's important that the new administration should focus on providing social houses.
Now, let's look at some of the general issues or events that shaped the year 2023 and some of the activities of the government and policies. You know, that's the focus of our conversation. The critical one is the removal of fuel subsidy. With the aftermath and the events that triggered the removal of fuel subsidy, would you say that it has been the right direction in the right path?
Well, the issues at stake is there's a debate ongoing whether this subsidy removal is even impacting on the very poor in society. But I think it's one of the greatest decisions that has been made by the government in recent time. But it takes time for some of these things to come into fruition. It is hopeful that in the new year, that impact, the positive impact of the removal, will be felt by a greater majority of the people. In addition to that, some of the social intervention that the government undertook in terms of providing some incentive to the very poor in society is salutary. But I think we expect more in the new year in terms of that kind of savings that we are making from the removal. To what extent can it impact on the general public and how the common good can be sustained?
All right, let's still look at development. You talked about the housing deficit, and well, let's look at the social intervention of government. Now, earlier I talked about how the government provided some cash transfer and even the 50% rebate. But do you think that was enough intervention given the challenges that the year suffered?
I think the interventions are welcoming, but my issue at a personal level is that there's a need to improve on what constitutes the social register. But we'll come to that realization that these are the real people that need such incentive. Then the social register must be transparent in a way that we can address the real poor people in society. On the other hand, the 50% rebate for transportation is debatable. Those who can afford the very popular route or the operators to a very large extent are relatively okay. Those who really need those 50% rebate, I'm not too sure if that 50% actually really get to the very poor in society. So you need to recalibrate that process in the new quarter of the new year to see how those incentives can really get to beyond the cash transfer, social transportation should be provided. Why don't they even give people some incentive by paying for transport, by giving money to those operators, by giving a card allowances so that that can easily be monitored, and you see the impact, and that goes to the real people. But then the little that they have provided is salutary, and you can always ask for more.
Let's turn to digital transformation. How much of that did we see in education, e-governance, and other areas in this year?
There's been a remarkable increase in terms of how we deploy technology in doing business. What remains to be seen is how government can scale up their own services by encouraging e-governance, e-government, to be able to scale up their services, and that will reduce the level of corruption that we currently experience. But we are not there yet, but I think there are some strategic moves towards achieving a digital transformation. But then that initiative has to come from the government by using the private sector to drive the process. And there are other countries within Africa that are there, up there in terms of how they have done digital transformation that helps their government ecosystem in terms of service delivery. So in 2024, government, particularly the Minister for Communication and ICT, should find a way to see how the government ecosystem is enabled through a digital transformation that will help to improve on service delivery, in my view.
Let's look at the area of education. You know, one of the activities that trailed that sector in the year 2023 was the impasse between the union, which is ASUU, and the federal government. Do you think, you know, the strike action was necessary? And then what are the lessons for Nigeria when it comes to dispute resolution, looking at what the President Tinubu has done recently in that regard? Do you think it was necessary to have gone that route whereby the strike action went on for months, and then coming back to the year, you know, you now have a situation whereby the issue of agreement started coming up, you know, the issue of trust and who to trust, whether to trust the government or not. What are the lessons here?
In my view, I think the strike was unfortunate, and I've always stated my position, personal position in that regard. I think ASUU as a union should be more creative in terms of the engagement with the government. The issues of collective bargaining and dispute resolution mechanism, strike action is one of those, but the frequency at which they have used strike action is not very encouraging. So going forward, we thank the president for trying to intervene by paying their salaries arrear. But then the university system must focus essentially on research and development. And in other clients, particularly in South Africa, the volume of funding from endowment and alumni association is so large that most of the university relies so much on that. So ASUU and the university administration in Nigeria, and going forward in the new year, should find a way to see how they can get more grants and more funding for research, rather than focusing on the strike action. They should be more creative. They should earn more money and find a way, what you call a bragging right. If they earn more money, they can brag about that to the government. So, but strike action, in my view, for industrial relation issue in Nigeria has been overflowed, and ASUU must look inward to see how best they can create value between town and gown in terms of how research can enable industry, and then they can benefit from that kind of synergy.
For the gains that we celebrate in this year, there could have been more. What were the challenges to development this year?
No, the challenge, one, the political economy was difficult, and there's a direct relationship with the political economy and other areas of development. The the political scene. Then the economy is in shambles. This is a import-focused economy, and we're struggling. The naira to the dollar has become a major issue. The issues of food inflation has become very challenging. So they have their impact in terms of development across various sectors. So I think the government should focus more in the new year to see how the various policy framework that they put in place, there's a greater level of implementation, a greater level of sanction for those who have infraction into a regulatory framework that are not respected. And earlier in the program, the Consumer Protection Council just brought to bear the issues with the British Tobacco Company and how they're trying to find them to pay some about $110 million. That money will come into the system, but to what extent can they use that money to improve on the social good?
Talking about major developments in 2023, you agree with me that one of the major, events that took place is the election itself, the presidential election in February. There was this anxiety about the election that, in fact, at the point, there was this prediction that, okay, a particular candidate is going to win, but it turned the other way. But how will you assess the conduct of that election generally, with what INEC put up? And then what are the take-home for INEC when it comes to conduct of election the coming year or any other election? I
think for me, the issue with INEC in the last general election was, if I use a concept from the salesmanship, I think INEC overpromise and underdeliver. There was a belief, particularly the millennial, who believe that this was a time for them to make a change. And all the promises made by INEC, to a very large extent, in the public domain, they couldn't sustain that that kind of promise that they made. But by and large, the election has come and gone. A winner has been declared. The president is already on the saddle of leadership. So for me, those challenges were there, but I think INEC should learn lessons in terms of the way they engage the public. Voter education is critical to the level of engagement that they had. But then the National Assembly must come with some new legislation that will put some of those issues and challenges that came up with the general election. Then the president, again, must equally make reform in terms of how they can put some of those recommendations from Uwe's panel in terms of creating various tribunals that will deal with the election. Some people are canvassing that INEC itself is overburdened and that they need to unbundle INEC as an institution into a smaller agency so that the efficiency in terms of the conduct of the general elections will be okay. But by and large, that threshold were passed by. So how do we support the new president to be able to deliver his campaign promises? I think that's the issues that we need to advance in 2024.
In terms of infrastructure investment, how would you assess Nigeria in 2023 infrastructure investments?
Well, there's some major stride in terms of some of the major road networks that were improved upon. The one that is highly celebrated is the second Niger Bridge that was commissioned recently, and that is a boost, a gateway between the southwest to the east. So that's a major one. There's another one, the rail system has been improved upon from Warri to Itakbe. There's an improvement in that. There's improvement between Ibadan, Abeokuta, and Lagos. These are major developmental strides that will improve transportation in Nigeria. But like Oliver Twist, the citizens are deserving of more services. So the policy regimes are okay, but to what extent can the government improve on those implementation so that those promises that President Ahmed Tinubu made to the public can be achieved in the next year?
Let's look at the transition between the former president and then the present president, you know, which after the election, a lot of people had thought, okay, because of the little crisis that trailed, you know, their primaries and all that, how will you assess so far how the president was able to undo that season, you know, that political season in the interest of the nation, and the fact that he's been looking at the fact that they are of the same party, you know, you have the former president from APC and then the present president who's also from APC, but they were not in agreement, you know, when it comes to some political philosophies. So how will you assess how the president has been able to undo that season till now?
Well, I don't want to deal with the, the realm of speculation in terms of the differences between the former president and the current president. What is important, we had a smooth transition in spite of the challenges that bedeviled the election. So the president is already at the end of affair. He has some deliverables and some promises that he has made to the public. So those transition issues, I think we have gone by. This is December. This is over almost 7 months into the new administration. So let's focus on the future, on how the current president can deliver value. Whatever happened at their political level, in my view, are in the realms of speculation, and I don't want to deal with speculation, in my view.
All right, as a wrap up, in the aspect of skills gap, which we could also refer to as human capital, how much of that was done building human capital to bridge a skills gap? How much did we see, how much improvement did we see in the year?
No, from the public sector, there's a lot of investment in trying to see how they can improve on the competencies of the workforce. The government made various investments in training and development for their staff. Then we hope in the new year there will be more in that sector. In private sector, that again, the economic downturn equally affect the investment that are made by company in terms of retraining their personnel. But then the competencies need to be improved upon, because when you have sound competencies, then you have sound management that will improve on productivity. For private company, that will impact on their bottom line positively. For the public sector, once their staff are properly trained, then they can deliver the common good for the greater majority of Nigerians.